I have to tell you about this wild thing that happened to me last week. I've been reading stuff online for kicks, and honestly, I think I might have had my own X-Files moment. I need to spill this out in parts because it's still messing with my head. So, picture this. I'm driving back from the late shift at the diner. The road's still wet from this downpour we had, and the night's got that spooky vibe where every shadow looks like it's moving. I'm on Black Pine Road, which is my usual shortcut. It's dead quiet out there, except for my car's engine and the occasional deer bolting across the road. I'm just minding my business, trying not to hit a tree or something, when suddenly my headlights catch this figure squatting on the side of the road. At first, I'm thinking it's just a big rock or something, but as I get closer, this rock stands up, and damn, it is definitely not a rock or deer. I swear this thing was tall and covered in scales that kind of shimmered with the wetness, like a snake, but standing up. Its eyes were reflecting this eerie yellow like cat eyes, and it just stared at my car as I slowed down. Not gonna lie, my heart was going like a drum solo at a rock concert. Now I know you're thinking it was some regular animal, but bears don't stand that tall and skinny, and they sure as heck don't have glowing yellow eyes or look like they just walked out of a lizard's nightmare. And this thing had a presence, like it was sizing me up, deciding if I was a snack. I was about to floor it and get out of there, but this creature, it just gave me this deep, guttural hiss, and then it bolted into the forest, faster than anything that size has any right to move. This lizard-like freak of nature just hightailed it into the trees, and I'm there trying not to have a full-on meltdown at the wheel. Eventually, I make it home, and I'm expecting to walk in the door and crash, but my brain's doing cartwheels, and not the fun kind. I keep replaying the hiss that thing let out. It wasn't just a normal sound. It felt like a warning, like it knew I'd seen too much. And those eyes, it's like they burned right into my head. Anyway, I couldn't just sit there and not do anything about it. I mean, what if it was some undiscovered species or heck, an alien or something? So, the next night I decide I'm going to go back. Yeah, I know. Cue the "you're nuts" speech, but curiosity can be a real killer. I gear up like I'm heading into battle, flashlight, camera, and my granddad's old hunting knife. Just in case, you know? I park my car a little way off from where I saw the thing the night before. Everything's quiet. I don't have to wait long. There's a rustling from the tree line, and this time, I see it clearly. This creature, this reptilian thing, it's like it stepped out of the shadows just for me, almost like it was expecting me. It's got these long limbs and claws, and its skin, it looks tough like armor, and it's got these spines or frills running down its back. I'm trying to stay still, trying not to freak out as I lift my camera. The thing tilts its head, like it's just as curious about me as I am about it. I manage to snap a picture, but right then, it lets out this hiss again, and I realize that sound is not just a sound, it's communicating. The hiss fluctuates in pitch, almost like it's trying to speak or something. Suddenly, there's this stomp, stomp, stomp. It now sounds like more are coming. I pan the flashlight around, and there are two more stepping out. They're all varying in size, but they have the same intense eyes and that spiny ridge. Now, I'm not ashamed to say I was scared out of my wits. I'm standing there, in a standoff with what looks like a trio of dinosaur-crocodile mashups, and I'm thinking, this is it. I'm about to become a cryptid snack. But they don't attack. Instead, they start making these clicking sounds, and they're looking at each other, then back at me. It's like they're having a debate, deciding what to do. The largest one, which I assume is the leader or something, steps forward. It's close enough now that I can see its nostrils flaring, and I can smell this musky, wild scent. The leader creature then makes a series of clicks and hisses, and the others back off into the woods. The leader holds my gaze, and there's this intelligence there, like something knowing. Then it gives one last look and disappears into the night with the others. I'm left standing there, heart going a mile a minute, clutching my granddad's knife like it's a lifeline. I get back to my car and I sit there for a minute. What just happened? Did I really just have a close encounter of the reptilian kind? This is the kind of stuff you see in movies, not in your own small town. I drove back home, this time with the windows up and the doors locked, no chances taken. I tossed and turned all night, every little sound making me jump, half expecting to see those creatures at my window. So, I'm practically buzzing the next morning, running on adrenaline and no sleep. The image of those creatures is like an image in my mind that won't switch off. So, I hit up the local library. Yeah, I know, old school, but sometimes you gotta get your hands dirty with some research. I spend the whole day buried in books about local legends, native folklore, and herpetology, anything that could explain what I saw. Turns out, there's this old legend from the native tribe that used to live in these parts. They spoke of a powerful spirit that could take many forms, often depicted as a serpent-like being, sometimes with limbs or even wings. It was said to be a guardian of the natural world, a shapeshifter, a bridge between the physical and spiritual realms. This got me thinking, could I have stumbled upon something ancient, something that's been here long before any of us? Now I'm torn between wanting to know more and the sinking feeling that some stones are best left unturned. But the pull is too strong. I feel like I've been chosen or cursed to see these things. I'm posting this here because maybe, just maybe, someone knows something. Or maybe I can find the courage to dive deeper into whatever mystery I've stumbled upon. So, there you have it. My brush with the impossible. What do you make of it? What would you do? And hey, if I ever get to the bottom of this, you'll be the first to know. So I've got a real crazy story to share. This isn't your typical campfire tale, but something that actually happened to me. It's kind of wild too. It all started last summer. I'm an outdoorsy type, always hiking and camping when I can get away. So one weekend I decided to explore this dense forest area a few hours from my place in Oregon. I'd heard rumors about it. Strange noises, weird sightings, the usual stuff you might hear about in remote places. I'm not superstitious, but I do love a good mystery. I packed up my gear tent, food, the basics, and headed out early. The drive was peaceful, just me and the open road. I arrived at the forest mid-morning. It was stunning, like something straight out of a nature documentary. Huge trees, chirping birds, the works. I started my hike, planning to reach a campsite I'd marked on my map by evening. The trail was rougher than I expected, but I was up for the challenge. As I trekked deeper into the forest, I noticed something odd. The usual sounds of wildlife started to fade. It was weird, but I figured maybe I was making too much noise and scaring the animals away. Around mid-afternoon, I stopped for a break. I was munching on a sandwich when I heard it, a deep, guttural sound like nothing I'd ever heard before. It was distant, but clear enough to make me stop chewing. I looked around, thinking maybe there was another hiker or an animal nearby. But no, I was alone. I brushed it off and kept moving, but that sound, it stayed with me, echoing in my head. I reached the campsite by evening, set up my tent, and made a small fire. I tried to relax, but I couldn't shake off a feeling of being watched. It was probably just the isolation getting to me, I told myself. Night fell, and the forest grew eerily quiet. I was lying in my tent trying to sleep when I heard footsteps outside. Heavy, deliberate steps, crunching on the forest floor. My heart raced. I thought about yelling out, asking who was there, but something inside me said that was a bad idea. Then I saw its shape on the tent in the moonlight. It was looming outside my tent. It was huge, way bigger than any person or animal I knew. I held my breath, hoping whatever it was would just move on. But it stayed there, just outside my tent, for what felt like hours. Eventually, the presence faded away and didn't return, and the forest noises slowly returned when it disappeared. I didn't sleep a wink that night. my mind racing with questions. What was that thing? Why did it come so close to my tent? As soon as the sun rose, I stepped out of my tent. There was a heavy mist covering the ground, and everything was damp. I looked around, half expecting to see some sign of last night's visitor. And that's when I saw them. Footprints. Huge, human-like footprints, but much bigger than any humans could be. They led away from my campsite, deeper into the forest. That's when it hit me. Could it have been a Sasquatch? I mean, I'd always thought those stories were just tall tales. But there I was, looking at something I couldn't explain. It was real, whatever it was. I was torn between packing up and leaving or following those footprints to get some answers. Curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my gear and started following the trail. It led deeper into the forest, to areas where it seemed like no one had ever been. The footprints were clear at first, but then they started to get erratic, like whatever made them was running. I kept going, the forest growing denser and the air getting colder. And then I found something that stopped me in my tracks. I stood there, frozen, staring at what I'd just found. It was a clearing, but not just any clearing. In the middle, there was a sort of structure, like a nest made of large sticks and leaves. It was massive, easily big enough for something the size of what I saw last night. I edged closer, my curiosity overpowering my fear. The nest, or whatever it was, looked recently used. There were bits of fur and... was that fabric? Yeah, torn pieces of what looked like clothing that set off alarm bells in my head. Had someone else encountered this creature? Were they okay? I heard a noise behind me and spun around. Nothing. Just trees and the faint rustling of leaves. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it. I decided to take a few photos with my phone just to prove I wasn't losing my mind. As I turned back to the nest, something on the ground caught my eye. A small, shiny object partially buried under a pile of leaves. I picked it up. It was a camera, one of those old, rugged types. It looked beaten up, but maybe it still worked. If I could find out who it belonged to, maybe I could get some answers. I pocketed the camera and decided it was time to head back. The sun was getting low, and I didn't want to be out here after dark, not after last night. I made my way out of there and at this point start thinking about where to sleep. I walked until the darkness made it impossible and felt safe enough to set up camp. I tried to start a fire, but my hands were shaking. Every little noise made me jump. I felt like eyes were on me from every direction. I barely touched my dinner, my appetite totally gone. As night fell, I crawled into my tent, the camera clutched in my hand. I couldn't stop thinking about the nest, the camera, those footprints. What had I stumbled upon? I needed answers. I was so engrossed in my thoughts that I didn't hear the footsteps outside my tent at first. When I did, it was like déjà vu, only this time they were heavier, more purposeful. I froze, not daring to breathe. The footsteps circled my tent, then stopped right beside it. I could hear breathing, heavy and ragged. It was right there, just a thin layer of tent fabric between me and it. I didn't move, didn't make a sound, hoping it would just go away like last time. Then without warning, the creature let out a howl. It was mournful, almost human, but filled with a sorrow and depth that sent shivers down my spine. The sound echoed through the forest, hanging in the air long after it had stopped. The creature moved away from my tent, its footsteps fading into the distance. I lay there, wide awake, until the first light of dawn crept into the sky. As soon as it was light enough, I packed up my gear. I had to get out of there, had to get back to civilization. I had proof now, undeniable proof of what I'd seen. I started the hike back to my car, moving as fast as I could. My mind was racing with what I'd experienced, what I'd seen. Who would believe me? Did I even believe it myself? I reached my car by mid-morning, threw my gear in the back, and drove off. I didn't stop until I reached home. So there I was, back at home, safe, but shaken. I couldn't get what happened out of my head. I started digging online, looking for anything about Sasquatch sightings in that area. That's when I stumbled upon a local news article from a few years back. It was about a hiker who'd gone missing in the same forest I'd just come from. They never found him. Could it be? Was it possible that this missing hiker had encountered the same creature? I sat there, staring at my computer screen, trying to process everything. Then I remembered the camera I'd found. The camera had to have belonged to the missing hiker. I needed to go to the police. They had to know about this. I packed up the camera and drove to the nearest police station. I told them everything: the sounds, the footprints, the nest, the camera. They listened, but I could tell they were skeptical. When I showed them the camera, though, their expressions changed. They told me they would need to keep it as evidence and that they would reopen the investigation. Days turned into weeks, and there was no news. I checked in with the police, but they hadn't found anything. It was like the forest had swallowed up all evidence. I couldn't let it go. I kept thinking about the creature, the missing hiker, the nest. I decided to go back to the forest. I had to find out more, had to understand what this creature was. I returned to the forest, this time with more caution. I avoided the spot where I'd camped before, instead focusing on the area around the nest. I spent days combing the area, looking for any sign of the creature or the missing hiker. Then, on the third day, I found something. It was a journal, half buried under leaves near the nest. It was water damaged, but some of the pages were still legible. It belonged to the missing hiker. The entries were fascinating and terrifying. He'd encountered the creature, just like I had. He wrote about how he'd tried to communicate with it, how he thought it was intelligent, maybe even human-like in some ways. His last entry was chilling. He'd decided to follow the creature, to try and understand it better. That was the last he wrote. I took the journal to the police, but again, it led nowhere. At least no one told me anything about what was happening. Eventually, they told me that the case went cold, and the mystery of the creature in that forest remained unsolved. I still think about that experience, about what I saw and found. I don't know what that creature was, whether it was a Sasquatch or something else, but I do know one thing. I'm now scared to death to camp deep in the forest alone. I haven't been back to that forest since, and I don't plan to. Some things are better left alone, left to the wild. So I never thought I'd be posting here, but here we are. So this happened to me last summer, and I'm still trying to make sense of it. I'm not really a believer in all this stuff, but I can't explain what I saw. Anyway, here goes. I live in a small town in Oregon, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. It's surrounded by forests and mountains, real picturesque. I work as a mechanic, fixing up cars and trucks, the usual stuff. But that summer, I had taken up stargazing as a hobby. My grandfather had been into it and got me interested. Also, there's not much to do around here, so looking up at the stars seemed like a decent way to spend the evenings. One night, I'm out in the field behind my house with my telescope. It's a clear night, perfect for stargazing. I'm checking out Jupiter, just amazed at how clear it looks through the lens when I notice something odd in the sky. It's this faint light, moving in a way that's just off, not like any plane or satellite I've ever seen. It's moving erratically, zigzagging across the sky, then stopping, hovering for a bit before moving again. I'm thinking it's probably some drone or something, but the way it moved, it was too fluid, too controlled. I keep watching it, trying to figure out what it is, when suddenly it stops and hovers directly above the field I'm in. Now I'm feeling a mix of excitement and a bit of fear. I've never seen anything like this. The light starts getting brighter, and I can see it's not just a light. It's a craft of some kind, circular, with lights running along its sides. It's hard to tell how big it is, but it seems massive. The weirdest part? It's completely silent. No engine noise, nothing. Just hanging there in the sky, like it's defying gravity. I'm frozen, staring up at this thing, when I start to hear this low humming sound. It's faint at first, but it gets louder, vibrating through the air. It's not just a sound. I can feel it in my chest, like it's resonating with something inside me. Then, out of nowhere, the craft starts to descend, slowly, coming closer to the ground. I'm thinking I should run, get out of there, but I'm rooted to the spot. I can't move, can't look away. The humming is getting louder, almost overwhelming now, and that's when I see it, a figure appearing beneath the craft. It's hard to make out at first. The light from the craft is so bright, but as it gets closer, I can see it's not human. It's tall, too tall, with limbs that seem too long for its body. Its skin, or whatever it is this weird, shimmering color, like nothing I've ever seen. The figure keeps descending, and that's when I realize it's coming straight towards me. I'm freaking out internally, but I can't move, can't scream, nothing. It's like I'm paralyzed. The humming is so loud now, it's all I can hear, and it feels like it's inside my head, vibrating through my whole body. The creature lands a few feet away from me. It's even more bizarre up close. It's got these large, almond-shaped eyes that seem to reflect the stars above. It doesn't have a mouth, at least not one that I can see. And its skin, it's like looking at the night sky. I can see colors shifting and moving under its surface, like I'm looking at a living aurora borealis. I'm staring at this thing, and it's staring back at me. There's this moment, this intense moment where it feels like it's looking right into me. Not just at me, but inside me, like it's reading my thoughts, my fears. I've never felt so exposed, so vulnerable. Then without any warning, it raises one of its long arms and points towards the sky. I look up, following its gesture, and that's when I see them. More lights, dozens of them, moving across the sky in formation. They're like nothing I've seen before, dancing and weaving around each other. It's mesmerizing. I look back at the creature, and it's still pointing up, but now it's turning its head, looking at me, then back at the sky. It's like it's trying to show me something or tell me something. I wish I could understand. Suddenly, the humming sound changes. It's no longer just a vibration. It's like a melody, a song without words. It's beautiful and sad at the same time. The creature lowers its arm and starts to move closer to me. I'm scared, but there's a part of me that's fascinated, that wants to understand what this is all about. As it gets closer, the air around us starts to shimmer, like heat rising off pavement. I can feel a tingling sensation on my skin, like static electricity. The creature stops just a few feet away from me, and we're just looking at each other. I don't know how to describe it, but it's like we're communicating without words. I can feel emotions, thoughts that aren't mine, swirling around in my head. Then, as quickly as it began, the moment is broken. The craft above us starts to rise, the humming sound growing fainter. The creature looks up, then back at me, and I swear, there's a sense of sadness, regret. It's hard to put into words. The creature turns and starts to ascend, joining the craft. I'm left standing there, alone in the field, watching as they disappear into the night sky. The last thing I see is the lights of the craft, blinking out one by one until there's nothing left but the stars. When I finally managed to move, to walk back to my house, I was in a daze. I didn't sleep that night, and the next day everything felt different. I went to work, talked to people, did all the normal stuff, but it all felt unreal, like I was just going through the motions. I kept thinking about the creature, the craft, the lights in the sky. I couldn't get it out of my head. A few nights later, I went back to the field with my telescope. I don't know what I was hoping for, maybe another sighting, maybe some kind of closure, I set up my telescope and scanned the skies, but everything was normal. No mysterious lights, no alien craft, just the stars and the quiet night. I was about to pack up and head home when I heard it again, that humming sound. It was faint, barely audible, but I recognized it instantly. I looked around, but I couldn't see anything. The sound seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Then I felt it, that tingling sensation on my skin, like static electricity. I looked up and there it was, the craft, hovering just above the treetops. It was closer this time, and I could see it more clearly. It was beautiful in a way that words can't really describe. It was like it was alive, part of the night itself. The craft descended slowly, and the creature appeared again, just like before. It stood there, looking at me, and I could feel that connection again, that unspoken communication. But this time, it was different. I could sense its emotions more clearly: curiosity, wonder, maybe even a kind of kinship. I don't know how long we stood there, looking at each other. It felt like time had stopped, like we were the only two beings in the world. Then, the creature raised its arm and pointed to the sky again. I looked up and saw the lights, moving in their intricate dance. But this time, I understood. It wasn't just a display. It was a message of some sort. I looked back at the creature, and it was as if a floodgate had opened in my mind. Images, emotions, thoughts. They poured into me, overwhelming and beautiful. I saw stars being born, worlds spinning in the darkness, galaxies stretching out into infinity. I felt a sense of longing, a desire to explore, to discover, to connect. And then, just as quickly as it began, it was over. The creature lowered its arm, and the connection was broken. I was left standing there, tears streaming down my face, filled with a sense of wonder and sadness. The creature turned and ascended into the craft, which rose into the sky and disappeared. I stayed in the field for a long time after that, just staring up at the stars, trying to process what had happened. I don't know why they chose me, why they showed me those things. Maybe it was random, or maybe there was a reason. I still don't have all the answers, but I know that what I experienced was real. It changed me in ways I'm still trying to understand. I live in southern Michigan, just south of Kalamazoo, and I want to share with you something that happened to me when I was in the woods behind my house, collecting firewood. Oh, and this happened about 7 years ago, by the way. It was in the early evening, and I was walking down a hill towards the creek when I heard something large moving in the woods to my left side. It made a loud crashing sound as it moved through the underbrush and sounded like it was headed straight for me, but despite the noise, I couldn't see anything at all. I stopped and stood still and listened intently, wondering what could be making such a commotion. The sounds stopped abruptly too, right when I did, then started up again. But they were on my right this time and now heading away from me until I couldn't hear it anymore. After that, I became very aware of noises around me and kept glancing around nervously while continuing to gather wood. Suddenly, they seemed to be coming at me from all directions. A few minutes later, I heard twigs snapping off to my left again, but much further away than before, maybe 100 yards. There were several loud snaps followed by silence, then more noises farther away still. I was beginning to get nervous that something was homing in on me. After about 10 minutes of this, the noises stopped and didn't resume for the rest of my time in the woods. When I got back to my house, I asked a neighbor if he'd ever heard anything unusual in the woods behind our houses. He said he's heard weird sounds before but never saw whatever made them, just felt uneasy whenever it happened. Exactly the same story as what had just happened to me. Neither of us had a good concrete answer for it. I've never heard anything like it before or since. My best guess is that it was a bear, but I'm still trying to figure that out. Bears usually just keep moving in the same direction unless they're following something, like prey, or being chased away from their food source. I don't know of any other animal that makes that kind of noise, and whatever made those noises was much too large to be a deer or other typical local wildlife. I've been back to those woods many times since then, and have never experienced anything like that again. And believe me, I was looking and listening for it. Maybe whatever it was must have been moving around on its own rather than tracking me specifically, which relieves some of my anxiety. But why did it sound like it started heading towards me 1 minute and away from me the next? And what made all those loud, snapping noises? It sounded like 2 pieces of wood being forcefully broken apart, and big ones too, and there were several distinct cracks each time. Anyway, there is just no answer. So since then, I've read a lot of the stories on your site and others. There are some similarities to other encounters, but mostly mine was just very strange and weird with nothing actually visual to report. But still, I decided to finally report this here because I was just reading online about a man who found a dead dog-like creature in Wisconsin called the Beast of Bray Road. And for whatever reason, that story prompted me to write into you. Oh yeah, and back to what happened to me. The one thing that stood out most, I think, was how loud the noise was even though it was far away. Like something really strong and powerful was making it